Hello everyone, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time you ended up deciding to watch this video, welcome. And today we are going to be talking about the heart, which is personally my favorite organ because I think it is incredible and you get to listen to it. You listen to it all the time working and it's just very cool to learn about. So I'm excited to share some new knowledge with you guys. So to start, we need to understand just the circulatory system in general. So you have your heart, and that's what pumps blood, but how does blood get around your body? Well, it goes through arteries and veins. So an artery is a vessel that's just a thin tube that carries blood away from your heart, and a vein is a vessel that carries blood to the heart. That's really important to keep in mind when we start to get into the thickness of how the heart pumps, what's going on, where the blood is going. So this is a really important concept to understand. Artery away, vein to. And then there's also capillaries, and I'm not going to focus too much on that, but capillaries are just really tiny vessels that blood goes through next to tissues for gas exchange. So my blood goes through my arteries, towards my tissues, through capillaries, gives the oxygen to where it needs to go, and back through the veins. So that is just a good concept to know about the circulatory system of the heart. Moving on to the actual anatomy of the heart is the chambers. These are the little rooms of the house of the heart. If we think of like a heart as a house, like this would be the room. So there's 4 rooms essentially. There's the atria, there's 2 of those, and then there's 2 ventricles. So both have separate jobs. So the atria are the entry chambers. They're the welcoming. They let the blood into the heart. And then the ventricles are the ones that are kind of like, okay, blood, you can leave. You stayed long enough. They push the blood out. They pump it away to wherever it needs to go. So you have your right side and your left side. So my right atrium, blood is coming in from the body. My left atrium, blood is coming from my lungs. Lungs, left. That's a good way to remember it, LL. And so then my right ventricle, it's going from my right atrium to my right ventricle, the lower part, and it's pushing it out. It's like, okay, you stayed long enough, blood. And it's pushing that blood to the lungs, while my left ventricle is pushing my blood away to my body. This might seem a little confusing right now. It's just a good trend to understand. We're going to get into actually how blood moves through the heart, and this will start making more sense once you know the whole picture. So the last kind of concept to understand before we get through actually how blood goes through the heart is the valves of the heart. Basically, they're these little cuspid flaps that keep blood from flowing into rooms they're not supposed to go into. So basically, like, once the blood goes from the atria into the ventricle, here, I can kind of show you. They're right here. They're between the rooms. They're like little doors. So let's see. So once the blood flows from the atria into the ventricle, it doesn't want to backtrack. It keeps it from backtracking. So that is what that does. So just to go through the different valves, we have the atrioventricular valves. Those are valves between the atria and the ventricle. So here's an atria. Here's the atria. Here's the ventricle valve. Atria, ventricle, valve. Those are the atrioventricular. Such a nice word. It has atrio, it has ventricular, it's right between the two. It makes total sense. Their actual names of the two are a little weird. There's the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve. I don't think it's too, you don't have to know the exact names, but the tricuspid is on the right side and the bicuspid, or mitral is another word for it, is on the left side. If you just know it's the atrioventricular valve, that's more important than knowing the actual name. And then there's the other type of valves. The other type of door is the semilunar valve. That is between the large arteries and the ventricles. So right here is a semilunar valve, and then right here. So there's the pulmonary valve and the aortic valve. Those are easy because the valve is the name of the artery it's going to. So the pulmonary valve is a valve between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, where the aortic valve is a door between the left ventricle and the aorta, which is an artery. Here's just kind of an above view of them to see what they look like. They're like little cusp things. They balloon up and shut it off to keep blood from flowing back into the heart, because if it just kept flowing back, we're trying to pump it out and it just goes back down, my blood's just going to stay in my heart. It's not going to go anywhere. So valves are super important. Okay. Now, last thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how blood circulates through the heart. So the circulation of the heart. This is really interesting. It's really important. I would suggest writing down what I wrote down, kind of in your own words, drawing pictures that make sense to you. But let's just go through it. So starting in the right atrium, on my right side of the heart, I think right is returning. So my blood is returning from the body to the right side, and it needs oxygen. So it's going to trickle down through that valve, the tricuspid, or the atrioventricular valve. And it's going to go into the right ventricle. Then the right ventricle is going to decide where it goes. It's going to contract, it's going to push the blood out, and it's going to go through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk, which is an artery. Now, something to keep in mind here is the blood oxygenated or deoxygenated? Well, it was deoxygenated here at this point, and it has yet to come to the lungs. So it's still deoxygenated, but it is going through an artery because it's going away from the heart. So that's a little trick. It's a pulmonary artery, but the blood is deoxygenated. So it's going to travel through that artery to the lungs for gas exchange right here, and then the blood will be oxygenated. Awesome. Well, now it's traveling back to the heart. Veins are vessels that carry blood to the heart. So now, even though it's oxygenated, this is called the pulmonary veins that's carrying the oxygenated blood to the heart into the left side. The left side is getting ready for the blood to leave the heart. So left leaving. This is when it's coming from the lungs, leaving to the body. So it's going to go to the left atrium through the bicuspid valve, or the atrioventricular valve. So it's going to go through there, and then the left ventricle is going to contract, and it's going to push the blood through the aortic valve into the aorta, which is a big artery that splits up into little arteries going around your body, which is going to go through capillaries, go to my tissues. That oxygen is going to go to my tissues. Now my blood is deoxygenated, and it's going to come back through my veins back to my heart. So that is an overview of the circulation of the heart. It's very important to know because it will make everything make 10 times more sense when you understand that. Lastly, this is a really cool website I'm going to leave below, and it kind of gets you to get a chance to really visualize and work with the heart, because it's kind of hard to visualize in your head on a 2D screen. So this is kind of a helpful website. The link will be below this video. So the anatomy of the heart, you just click next right here. And this is a cool little thing. It shows here's an atrium, here's the ventricle, going back here are these little valves, here's the left side. So that's just a good view. Here are a bunch of arteries and veins kind of around the heart that you'll get to practice with. I don't really think you need to know the exact names of all the arteries and veins, but generally it's good to know if it's an artery or vein or what's going on. So this is just practicing with those valves. So practicing like, oh, I'm clicking on a valve. Which one's that? Oh, which one's that? Try to push yourself and guess the valve before you just start pushing out things. Here's another picture. It just kind of shows these structures in the heart. So there's these strings here, and then there's these little muscles here. So the strings, or the muscles, are called the papillary muscles. basically they pull on these chordinae tendae, the little strings. These muscles pull on the strings and open the valve. Chordinae tendae are literally your heartstrings, which I think is so interesting. You will not have to know it, but pulling at your heartstrings, yeah. Just a cool phrase that now you're kind of like, oh, I do have heartstrings. Okay, so this last kind of part of the intro stuff that you'll look at is the blood going through, and it's kind of crazy at once, but it will make more sense if you just take your time. So deoxygenated blood right here is going to start. It's going to come through, pump out, go to the lungs. Now it's oxygenated. It's going to come through these little things here, boom, left side, and then it's going to pump out. It went really fast, but it comes in, boom, out. Here's the aorta. So this kind of gives you the ability to follow along with those notes that you just wrote down, and kind of follow around. Oh, is the blood oxygenated, deoxygenated? Where's it going? What's going on? So lastly, you're just practicing the different words. So click on the right atrium. Next, click on the left atrium. So this is just practicing on what things are. It'll be really helpful. I really recommend you doing it. So please bring your questions to class. We'll go over questions before beginning our activity. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.